listening to Perfume on the Radio.
On lookout FM.
In 1862, the British chemist and perfumer George Williams Septimus Piess published a book called The Art of Perfumery and Method of Obtaining Odors from Plants. In this book, he published a diagram that equates music notes to fragrances on the treble clef. At the bottom of the scale, we see a D, pleasant, unassuming, and to him equivalent to violet. Next, we have E, acacia, and F, tuberose. So far, so good. Up the scale we go. Camphor, almond, jonquil, mint, and jasmine. Satisfying. At the very top, we end with a high C, pineapple, D, citronella, E, verbena, and the highest note on the diagram, a high F. And this, to me, is where everything falls apart. A high F lives at a pitch that might make your dogs howl. It's tinny, it's strident, it's bright. What it is not to me is the deeply oily, fecal, and funky animalic smell called civet. To me, civet is very low frequency, a deep growl of funk. If it's an F note, it's the lowest F note on the scale. So why do we disagree? Perhaps we're smelling different types of civet. Perhaps I just don't get what he gets out of civet. Perhaps my nose is tired and I'm just wrong. Or perhaps we're living in a realm where both of us can be right at the same time. Interpretation isn't science, after all, and there are no cold hard facts. Therein lies the beauty, the unexpected, and the art. Today, I am joined by Dana El Masri for a collaborative episode exploring the relationships between scent and sound. Dana, who you'll be hearing a lot from over the course of the next hour, runs a podcast called On the Nose, where she delves deeply into the minds of her guests to explore all aspects of the practice of perfumery. It's well worth checking out. Dana and I will be joined by olfactory artist Peter de Cupere from Belgium, rap pioneer Yo-Yo Fearless here in LA, Heather D'Angelo from Au Revoir Simone and Carta Fragrances in San Francisco, followed by Texas-based musician and perfumer Chavalia Mwamba. Finally, Kaya Sorhaindo, the founder of iconic creative entity Folie Plusieurs, joins us from New York. My name is Saskia Wilson-Brown, and you're listening to Perfume on the Radio, Episode 9, Music and Smell, which we've produced in collaboration with Dana over at On the Nose podcast. Let's get started. You've heard Dana El Masri on our show before when she discussed scent associations with place in our first episode, but let me introduce her again. Dana El Masri is an Arab-Canadian perfumer and interdisciplinary artist based in Montreal. She was trained at the Grasse Institute of Perfumery, after which she started Jazmin Saraï, a perfume brand that explores scent, sound, and culture. I started our conversation asking her about why she wanted to make perfumes inspired by musicians and mixtapes. Here's Dana.
When I went into the Grasse Institute of Perfumery, I noticed a lot of scent and music connections and crossovers very early on. Realizing that perfumers have organs and that there's scent notes and all of these different things kind of just made sense. And I decided to create scents that were inspired by sounds or like olfactory reinterpretations of songs, because music is universal and scent isn't.
Totally. And this would have been back in 2013-14, right? Like this was a while ago.
Oh, yeah. Like I started the business 7 years ago, which was around 2014, but I been working on the idea since 2010, because essentially, actually, my first accord in the lab at school was the scent of old records. I really love that smell, and I was really curious. Weirdly enough, it has some materials that you can't really use on a like a mass level, like methyl eugenol and some allergens, things like that dusty book smell, the mustiness, the dryness, that old vintage vibe.
And I guess the musty book smell would come from the record covers, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So what was some of the first musicians that sort of inspired you to make scents?
For Jazmin Saraï specifically, it was Neon Graffiti and MIA. I've been listening to MIA for many, many years, and I really loved what she stood for and how strong her lyrics were. And the fact that she was doing a lot of like producing a lot of her music herself. And at the time, Sun Showers, I hadn't even seen the video, but I kept listening to this song and I really had a very intuitive feeling to create it in scent form. And I also kept smelling neon, something neon in the song, and this like jungle vibe. I don't know how else to describe it. There was a gunpowder jungle vibe with a lot of neon and wet cement. And then I looked at the video and she's riding on an elephant. She's in the jungle in Sri Lanka.
No way. Wow.
It all kind of made sense. And that's really, where neon graffiti was born.
The idea of neon is such an interesting thing in perfumery because, of course, neon itself has no smell, right? Or maybe it does, but it's not something we access.
That is interesting, yeah, because in the beginning when I was working on that, I had the opportunity to show it to a few perfumers, and they would say, like, bring up the neon, make it more neon. I was still very much influenced by the classical trainings. And I was thinking about, okay, this is my debut collection. I need to have something that's approachable, that isn't like super weird. So I know that neon graffiti could probably get weirder. Like if I were to make a new neon graffiti now, it would be a lot more metallic, a lot more neon, less wearable.
So, okay. So after MIA, what did you tackle? I know there was Otis in Me. When did that come in?
That was right after, and it was pretty organic. That was the clearest one to me. And it was the shortest formula. So that's only 10 materials. And I really wanted to capture a conversation with Otis Redding.
So how did you imagine that conversation?
Well, I mean, listen to that song, Cigarettes and Coffee. He's telling you. It's just like he's sitting there with cigarettes and a cup of coffee, like 3 a.m. So I just thought of a very monochrome diner, late night conversation with a friend, with a lover, with a mentor, anybody that you're just totally enraptured with that conversation. You know, what's that movie? Is it 1,000 Cigarettes?
Yeah, it was like an MTV movie in the 90s, right?
Yeah. So like I thought of that a lot, and I thought of Tom Waits. There was a line in one of Tom Waits's songs, I think it was Circus, and he said the music was like electric sugar. And I recreated electric sugar.
Wow.
That was fun. That was a lot of fun.
That sounds enticing. Actually, at some point you started making mixtapes, if I recall correctly, or maybe I'm remembering that wrong. Is that right?
Well, I'm a 90s kid, and I think one of the coolest, most thoughtful, and actually even most romantic things you can do is make a mixtape for somebody. Initially, it was Scent and Music, but I also wanted to expand into culture, and music is culture, right? So the idea of the mixtape was really, okay, I need to showcase samples. So why don't I just make a mixtape? Instead of songs, there'll be perfumes.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, and I started with like vintage tapes. Actually, it was Ashley and Amy's tapes from the basement that they found.
Talking about Ashley Eden Kessler, our friend and person.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And fellow GIP alumnus.
And her sister Amy, who's awesome.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, they really, I think I had the idea in LA. I don't even remember how it came to me. And so I was like, yeah, let me just try this out. Obviously, I couldn't keep reusing vintage cases, but I found a really good supplier who uses recycled plastic. I'm actually trying to figure out like a non-plastic alternative because it's the only plastic I use. But essentially now I have cassette cases that I paint with alcohol ink because I love painting with alcohol ink. So each piece is totally unique. And there's a little J card in there. And now it's like the whole set. You get to hear, smell the whole thing all together.
So the concept of scent and music, is this something that goes back?
Yeah, I believe it's late 1800s with Septimus Pies. I believe he's the first one who came out with the idea of pairing chords with scent. I had a lot of interest in many sensory mediums, but none of them really made a lot of sense. And in perfume school, the whole idea of synesthesia really just kind of like hit me in the face, especially with scent and sound, because I would remember lemon or grapefruit and help decipher between the two by giving myself a musical association to some of them. Lemon to me was super high pitched, or citral was really, really bright, neon high pitched versus, let's say, vetiver, which was kind of like a bass. And the idea of top, middle, bass notes in perfumery definitely help with the musical imagery.
Right. Yeah, totally. And it comes from music, if I'm correct. Is that right?
Yeah. I have a bachelor's in communication studies, and I went into sound production specifically. And, Pro Tools or GarageBand or a lot of these music software programs, not now, but whenever I did construct things, especially in the beginning, I really did have that same kind of visual in mind. I really do believe in the vibrational theory of smell as well, right? Just like music.
The one proposed by Luca Turin, you mean?
Yes.
The idea that, okay, yeah.
I totally agree with him on that. I mean, even the way that music and smell is transported in the air is, I feel, very, very similar.
Yeah.
In the way that we perceive it, the way that it hits our bodies.
And the way that it dissipates too, it kind of disappears.
And it's really fleeting. It just disappears almost instantly. And I mean, those were things that I loved. Like those were the most obvious connections to me. I'm like, wow, they're both nostalgic. They're both invisible. They're both time-based. They both have a similar structure. They both vibrate. They both emanate through your soul. It's very primal. You don't need a lot of time to feel anything, and you don't have enough time to intellectualize it. Yeah. So I thought to myself, okay, interesting, because in a perfume accord, it has to be harmonious, just like a song. I actually use a lot of sound mixing metaphors for people now, and it really helps. So let's say, you don't want a lot of citrus, then maybe you'll put it in the back. So you'll put it on like the fourth track instead of the first, and you'll bring it a little bit down. Versus, you don't want the snare drum to be super, super loud or like super pronounced. So you'll put it every 5 seconds instead of every 2 seconds. And so there's certain structures involved that I feel are very, very similar to how you actually create a fragrance.
That was Dana El Masri joining from Montreal. As this episode was a collaboration between Dana and I, you'll be hearing quite a bit more from her over the course of the next hour.
Peter de Cupere is a pioneering olfactory artist with decades of work in the medium. He creates work that is intended to explore and expand our experiences of smelling. As part of his olfactory art practice, de Cupere explores technology, and it is in this regard that we invited him to join us. Peter called in from his home near Antwerp and shared a lot of olfactory instruments that are in many ways impossible to describe, so be sure to check out perfumeontheradio.com to see images of them. We started the conversation asking Peter how scent brought added meaning to a piece of art.
Actually, I think scent is really powerful to give context to a work of art. And there are fragrances that by its own has a kind of context already, most of the fragrances. And we can also add new context to a fragrance and play with that, use it as a kind of symbol. It also has impact not only on the experience, but also on the way you're thinking. It's also different from culture to culture. So you can make some confusions that you can use, but you can also use them to let people think about other ways of living. For example, when I use the smell of air pollution, it has a very strong meaning by itself. When you use that in an artwork, you get already a lot of context to it where you can play with. So for me, I find it easier to work with this, sometimes with bad smells in that way, than with beautiful fragrances.
Is this because some smells have specific conceptual or symbolic meanings for people?
Yeah. So what can you say with a rose? Actually, you can say a lot with a rose, but it depends how you combine it with other artworks, with other materials, other things. To give an example, the smell of grass. It's such a simple fragrance, but when you give the idea of freedom to it, that, for example, refugees had to fly over the water, and then they come on land, and there is a white meadow filled with grass. And when you use that idea as freedom, then you use it as a symbol and not as the idea of grass by its own.
You've done some work with Septimus Pies and his Eau-de-Phone. Can you tell us a little bit more about him?
Septimus Pies, he's a perfumer and chemist or scientist, and he invented the Eau-de-Phone. I don't know anything about music in general, but I like the idea from the Eau-de-Phone because it's based on the notes. He compares music with the notes of fragrances. Actually, I think he was the one who invented the idea of describing notes to perfumery. So to make a composition with it, to make accords, and to compose the fragrance in that way. So I was working about the idea of making music with smells, but then without sound, like with the olfactiano. And the olfactiano is the scent piano I created in 2004. I was busy before with language and smell, because it was difficult, and it's still difficult to describe smells. So I wanted to create my own smell alphabet. And I started, I think, in 1995. I finished my school with a smell carpet, with a letter type. I designed it, and every letter had this kind of herb, spices used for it. And then I was thinking further, why not create a piano with it, with the idea of a smell alphabet. So I created a piano with 27 keys on 3 layers, like base notes, middle notes, and top notes, and based on the idea of perfumery.
Fascinating. So to be clear, the olfactiano equates letters to scent rather than musical notes?
Yeah. So olfactiano actually exists out of 27 keys. 26 of them are based on the alphabet, and 1 key is just for fresh air. So the idea is I could write sentences, words with it, sentences between each word, give fresh air, and then the other one. So the olfactiano, you could say, in one way, was a kind of tribute also to the other form from Septième Pièce. Only I didn't know at that time when I was making it, designing it, about Septième Pièce. Some months ago, I got a request to do a working together with blind people. And that gives me the idea to start it over again with the olfactiano, to recreate a new kind version of it based on a smell alphabet. So I'm creating at the moment the alphabet. It's an olfactory alphabet. It will be in an exhibition in May, where there will be a big installation only focused on the alphabet. And there will be also a new scent piano. I also created these little playing things. For example, this is the odor, I call it. And I put the fragrances within inside here.
He's holding up a gramophone, and there's little attachments in the stem of the gramophone where he's plugging in little smell things.
Yeah, it makes sounds, actually. It's a horn, so it really makes sounds. I have a little one. So when the smell is coming out, it takes the air, takes the smell with it, and coming out. Imagine, or when you go to manifestations and you put the smell of Scatol in it, I'm sure you will have place. Everyone will go away.
So for some of our listeners who aren't familiar, Scatol is a smell that smells very strongly of poo. It's quite unpleasant.
So it's like a trumpet gramophone protective tool.
Yeah, you could say so. And then this is a little one. And then you have to blow here. But the smell is coming through your nose, like. And this is the other rattle. And there are scented polymers in it. And this one is with 3. So you can have the base note, middle note, and a top note you can do inside. And you have a composition of scent where you can play and listen to.
That's so fantastic. That's the first scent rattle I've seen in my entire life.
Yeah, I love that. Actually, right before you showed that, my first instinct was I have little talking shakers that have different sizes. And how interesting would it be if they had holes in them and then you come up with exactly that?
I try to prove to people that sound has an odor. So when you clean your ears with an earbud and you smell to the earbud, then you smell something from the earwax you smell. But when you listen one day to classic music and one day to heavy metal music, you smell the difference in between them. It smells totally different. Mm-hmm. And that's really amazing to test it out. It's also kind of joke in my way, because when you listen a whole day to heavy metal music, it's smelling more to metal in one way. It's also very normal because there's more blood coming to your ears. So there will be more metal scent that's in the blood, stick to the earwax. So, and that was why I was playing me with. But just to let people imagine for just a few seconds that it's possible that sound has a smell.
That was Peter de Cupere joining me and Saskia from Belgium. As I mentioned at the beginning of the interview, he shared a lot of smell-emitting gadgets, and you can see some of them on perfumeontheradio.com.
Yolanda Whitaker, better known as Yo-Yo Fearless, is a Grammy-nominated hip-hop artist, actress, and entrepreneur. Much of Yo-Yo's music advocates for female empowerment, denouncing the frequent sexism and misogyny in hip-hop music. The protege of gangsta rapper Ice Cube, Yo-Yo dubbed her crew the IBWC for the Intelligent Black Women's Coalition. In 2020, Yo-Yo started studying perfumery and will be releasing several projects soon, and she joined us from Los Angeles.
Yo-Yo, thanks again so much for taking the time to answer our questions today. We're really excited to have you. My first question is, how have you related perfume to your practice as a rapper so far?
Well, first of all, hip hop is all about, like being the best, bragging and being braggadocious. So as a woman, I have had to embrace all of that: style, beauty, fashion. Megan Thee Stallion and Cardi B, they've been on the biggest magazines ever due to fashion. When I was coming up, it wasn't that easy for us to obtain all of that. Hip hop it was a street art form, so it wasn't as embraced as it is now. I mean, how you smell is really important. Yeah, I mean, the scent that catches your attention. And, when you're headed out to perform, it's all about being confident. And that's very important to an artist. I mean, I know for me, because a lot of fans really don't know what the artist smells like, and it kind of sets the tone.
That's interesting. So it gives you sort of a personal relationship with the fans, and you present yourself in the flesh, in the way that you want to present yourself to the fans. Is that right?
Yes, it sets the tone. And it goes a long way. Scent really sets the tone, because who was it? It was Slick Rick. I think he had that song Lottie Dottie. Threw on my pants and my polo cologne, fresh dressed as $1 million, And so as a teenager, it was acknowledged that it wasn't just about the looks. It wasn't just about the clothes. It was also about the scent. Hip hop has such a stereotype. And so I think in the beginning, it kind of gives you an inside feel. I mean, you almost want to go inside their house and see how it's decorated. And so when you smell the scent, or someone tells you the kind of cologne they wear, it puts you in a mind state of who this person is outside of the artist that you're listening to or the performer you're watching. When I came out in the early 90s, a lot of journalists would say, are all women gay? Like it was such a stereotype, but that women had to be gay in order to rap because it was such a masculine art form. And so I think trying to find a scent that said powerful, respect, feminine, and single at that time, try to find all of that wrapped in one was pretty much a way that it was a language that spoke for itself. I didn't have to say much. The scent said it all for me.
That's
really curiosity, cool. What scent was that you just that you chose that represented all of these things? I'm a
cocktailer. I'm always mixing, but I like a lot of woodsy smells. I'm rarely in the florals. But Joe Malone has a lot of scents that I match a lot. When someone would say, "What are you wearing?" It was always hard to say because I'm like, oh God, I used to always wear my Gina Tay. I would splash that on first. Like I had like a whole routine. I used to wear this Chanel Sheen when they used to do the Sheen spray where you spray your body with the Sheen oil. They discontinued it.
Oh man, that sounds pretty cool. So it'd make you a little shiny.
It added the first layer.
I'm curious, do you think there's a culture of thinking about scent or talking about scent in early hip hop and today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, hip hop, even though, we're not wearing suits, and ties, and their street clothes, it's still important. It's high fashion. And the scent is very important because the scent is very necessary for the audience. They are paying attention. They are looking for the influence. They want the memory of it. So, to have a fan approach you and get a scent, and they're like, wow, And, sometimes that's all they remember. Yo, you always smell good. Yo, I'm just, but I love perfume. So it's always like, it matters to me. And I think it matters to a lot. I can remember a person by their smell. I judge by the smell.
Do you see any parallels between perfumery and music, or specifically hip hop?
Oh, of course. I mean, all of the scents, it sets it up based off of, I could have a horrible day. I could experience death, contract situations. But if I have to go in the studio and write a song, the smell of the room, almost like, you remember when you were young, your mom, you could smell the bacon in the kitchen and you could smell the biscuits, cooking, and you knew you were going to have a great day. You knew your mom was in a good mood. Why? Because you can smell the food cooking. You knew by what she was cooking. Going into a studio and, the vibe, what am I seeing? What am I looking at? But more than anything, it's the scent that sets it. Some artists love to light candles. Some artists love incense. Some love the air conditioner on, so it pushes out the smell. You really just have a, clean room. I used to love to have candles lit, and I had this ritual where I would smoke a cigarette and have some champagne because my favorite artist, writer would do it. So it always starts with the scent.
When Saskia told me that we were talking to you, the first question that did come to mind was, do you find anything in common, or in terms of, especially now that you're starting to make your own perfumes or learning how to construct things, do you see anything in common with cadence, the rhythm, or flow specifically when it comes to making a fragrance?
Yeah, just creating your own melody, putting it all together, which I'm very excited to have learned how to do. And even with some of the samples I've made now, I'm still looking for a certain tone. I'm still looking for a certain melody with the perfume. I see a complete parallel. You want this orchestra, how do you want it to play out? And so, it mellows out with music for me. What about you, Donna? Do you find the rhythmatic flow to be in the same body as perfume?
Yeah, absolutely. I see so many connections, and I've also explored other musical genres, so specifically Arabic music. So there's a lot of quarter tone in there, and it's a completely different setup.
Hip hop, the herb smell is real big. So when you have like the woodsy smells, remind me of hip hop.
That actually sets a really good picture.
Yeah, the greens, the figs, with hip hop and just the smell of itself, because, the studio has kind of like its own kind of vibe. It's a lot of wood. The booth is, you're surrounded by cedar wood, and you mellow it out with different smells. So
you've just actually given us like the question of, what does hip hop smell like?
Yeah, totally.
In general.
Now we know.
Right.
Figs, woodsy, herb. So what are you hoping to do with your perfume? Do you see it as a parallel track for yourself, or are you hoping to sort of create some sort of synergy between your performances and your perfume making?
I wanted to kind of introduce a scent to my audience in a way that, not just, for me. The first day I took one of your classes, they were saying, oh, yeah, call it yo-yo, call it yaya, this. And the first thing Michael says was, aren't you glad no one wants to smell like Beyonce anymore? The days of smelling like Beyonce are over. I was like, okay, out the window goes that idea. It had me set aside the yo-yo to creating a scent that I want the audience to smell, and outside of that, but to create, like you said, a scent for the audience. Because I think especially hip hop, because we have this stereotype, I love meeting strong, confident women, because we've been taught to be crabs in the bucket in hip hop. It's one girl to a clique. Queen Latifah was one girl with the Naughty by Nature. Myself with Ice Cube and the Lynch Mob. There was not like a bunch of girls. It was one girl to a clique, because we don't have enough of it around. And even now, you have the lawyers hang around, or the assistants or something. I just wanted to produce something that had power in music.
And would you imagine, like, when you're performing, propagating that scent to the audience?
Great question. Yeah. How do you get that smell out? Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question.
I guess maybe to rephrase the question a little bit would be like, what do you think it would bring for your audience to have that smell when you perform? Do you think would you hope it would make them connect to you better?
Without question, it would definitely have them connect to understand like, wow, I knew Yo-Yo. They've loved me. They've watched me. They're on my social media page. I mean, when they meet me in person, they go, wow, I knew you were nice. I knew you smelled good, or I know, because of, and they kind of try to pick you apart to try to figure out who you are, and the scent will definitely connect.
When you incorporate scent in live performance, you're creating this primordial emotional connection between you and your audience, and you're adding a new memory and a new layer to their experience, because they're like, oh, okay, I can't wait to go to this Yo-Yo show. And well, also we can't wait to go to live shows in general, but how exciting, right? To go to a Yo-Yo show. And then there's this whole new element that has no words, right? It's describing your rhythm, your rhyme, your lyrics, your flow, all of the things that you want to express, including your physical energy, but also this whole other layer that expresses you as an artist, but also your music.
When you're talking, I can see it. And as you're talking, it just reminds me of when I go into a room. And to be specific, the House of Blues has its own smell. So, you go to the House of Blues and the House of Blues has this smell. You go to the foundation room, or I go to a hotel, it sets the tone for me. So I can definitely see how, and I wasn't even thinking that, but that's what's so good about saying yes and showing up. Being a part of this perfume school did a lot for me. I'm so glad that I committed to it, and have been committed because it's really expanding my brand and my vision.
Well, I'm excited to see where this new adventure leads you, Yo-Yo, because you have such an amazing career already. I'm interested to see how you apply your thinking and your knowledge and your brain to scent. So keep us posted.
I will.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Yo-Yo. Your answers were really great. It was great to talk to you.
That was Yo-Yo Fearless, hip-hop icon and defender of women everywhere, joining Donna and me from her home in Los Angeles. You can learn more about Yo-Yo with a Google search, but fair warning, you'll get lots of results because she's kind of amazing.
You're listening to Perfume on the Radio.
On lookout FM.
Heather D'Angelo is 1/3 of the band Au revoir Simone, and the owner and perfumer of the brand Carta Fragrances. Heather is also an ecologist and is inspired by the complexity of Earth's ecosystems and the people working to protect them. She founded Carta in 2017. She also happens to be one of the members of the Coalition of Sustainable Perfumery. Heather joined us from San Francisco, and there was a bit of an audio issue, so bear with us.
I'm curious. So obviously you are still in this band, Au revoir Simone, is that correct? Yeah?
Yeah. We haven't, broken up or anything, but I'm in San Francisco and they're in New York City still. So definitely things have slowed down.
Yeah, COVID. So being in this band, how did you become interested in scent? I mean, did that relate to your sort of trajectory as a musician, or?
So it's interesting. I'm definitely one of those people that before I became a perfumer, I was one of those people that I liked to buy perfume. So I was more of a consumer of fragrance. That was always the thing that I wanted to buy. When I used to tour in France, I always would go to the Serge Lutens store, which is like the most beautiful perfume store, I think, in the world. And like, I'd buy like one of those beautiful bell-shaped bottles, and that would be like my treat that I'd buy myself when I was on tour. So I started buying a lot of fragrance. As someone who's like very aesthetically sensitive, like I love to cook, I love spices, like I love to smell things. I think it all just kind of goes together. Like I'm just like a sensory overload kind of person. I love music. I feel like that's true of a lot of perfumers. We all really love cooking. We all really love food. We all really love music. Like it's just that kind of heightened senses maybe overall. But I was touring, for over a decade, and you can't really have things when you're on tour, when you're like living out of a suitcase. So certainly like learning how to make perfume wasn't something that was on my radar. But at some point I had a friend who was getting married, and her friend David was making her a custom fragrance for her wedding. And she invited me to go to his perfume studio one day. And I had never been to a perfume studio before. And, I knew nothing about it. But I was like, ooh, that sounds really cool. She just knew that I loved perfume and she wanted my feedback about the scent he was creating. So we went to his studio in Brooklyn, and it was David of the brand DS and Durga. And so I got to see his workspace, and I'll just never forget that moment, just walking into a real perfumer studio and just seeing lines of bottles and his desk in the middle. And he just had all these potions, and I just never felt so called to something. And so that's when kind of the seed was planted, but I still had years of Voix Simone to go and years of touring, but I'd never forgotten that moment and thinking about, one day I am going to try to make perfume. I'm going to get into it as a hobby. So then I moved to San Francisco in, that was 2014. Finally, in the first time in my life, I had space to buy things and start collecting things. So I set up a home music studio, which I had never had in my life, actually getting to set up all my keyboards and all my amps. And I started dabbling in perfume, perfume craft. And so I started, of course, getting little bottles through Perfumer's Apprentice and reading all the books by Mandy Astell, watching YouTube videos. And the crazy thing is the year that I moved to San Francisco and I moved to the Mission was the same year that Tiger Lily opened a block from where I live. And so I just had this crazy, serendipitous, I was how insane that the minute I'm thinking about making perfume, this indie perfume store opens that's very community focused. And Antonio was all about bringing San Francisco's, perfume community together. And so I suddenly found myself for the first time, not only with the time and the space to start this hobby, but with a built-in community that was facilitated. So everything just really flowed so incredibly. And I ended up just teaching myself, as many perfumers do. I only wish I lived in LA so I could have gone to your classes, your amazing classes. And I did that for about 4 years. I was just doing it as a hobby before I ever considered launching my own brand and really thinking about maybe I should try selling perfume to, or more than just giving it away to friends and family.
How do you think your experience in music has informed your perfumery practice?
I was really surprised to find that when I'm composing fragrance, it's actually really similar to me to composing songs. When I'm writing music with my bandmates, the songs just come through me from somewhere else. I kind of have an out of body experience, and I just feel creativity is moving through me, and it's a very organic process. It's very intuitive. And when I'm working on fragrance, it's the same process completely. It's the decisions I'm making aren't logical. They're it's very much, and it's the same as when I'm cooking, honestly. I don't really use cookbooks. So it's when I'm cooking, everything is by taste. I'm making decisions in the moment just based on how I'm feeling and aesthetically where I want the thing to go. And so whether I think anything for me where I'm creating something of beauty or trying to compose something or really communicate something through a craft, I think it just comes through me. I don't know. That's what seems the most similar. And I was just very surprised to find it with perfume because I thought oh, it's very scientific. I'll be using 10% of this and 20% of that. And there is, of course, a technical side to perfume, but in the very beginning, when you're composing a fragrance, it's very intuitive and you're just making decisions that come from somewhere else.
I like the idea of the muses, I always feel the muses are sort of breathing through you somehow. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you like to keep the mediums separate? Do you prefer them kind of in their little spaces, or do you often see them as equated to one another?
I do see them in conversation with each other, where for every fragrance launch I've composed a song that goes with the perfume. So yeah, my perfume brand is very much about telling the story of a place, and I tell it through scent. But historically, in my life, I'm very used to communicating place, my sense of place through music. That's all the songs I've ever written are usually trying to capture a feeling of a place I had. And so it is similar. It's just a different way to me of expressing how I feel about a place.
Is there anything else that you feel people haven't explored or don't know about scent and music?
That's a good question. We were kind of touching on in our in the scent trunk, not scent trunk, for the scent festival, that kind of idea of thinking more about relationships between specific scents, like chords, chords in music and chords in scent, and which again, it's not, there's no science to it, but just thinking about how a bass note like vanilla might be like a D chord or something, thinking more about those kind of relationships, I think would be fun. It's not something I've explored a lot, but I kind of theory would be interesting to explore more. It's something I'm interested in. Yeah,
me too. I mean, I have a running joke that I can only sing in D minor with a friend of mine. So it's this very melancholic sound from the 50s. I'm like, where's this coming from? And for me, I don't know if this is an association that was created in perfume school, but my Max Gavari, a perfumer who was our teacher, would always say the labdanum is very sad. And so I thought about sadness and labdanum and melancholy and D minor or A minor.
And actually. D minor. Yeah, that's you speaking my language. Definitely. Yeah. I wish there was a class on that, or maybe it's something we can explore more together and think about. But that stuff's really interesting to me because I know that there's something there. It's not something I've had the time to think too deeply about. It's something I more intuitively sense is real.
That was Heather D'Angelo joining us from San Francisco. You can learn more about her work with scent at cartafragrances.com and about her work with music at aurevoirsimone.com.
Chavalia Mwamba is a music educator musician and the founder and perfumer of Pink MahogHany Fragrances, which is an independent perfume line that she founded in part to help her process her grief after the loss of her son. With her complex creative background, Chavalia has a lot of insight into the relationship between scent and sound, and she joined Donna and me from Texas. Here's Chavalia.
Without being too technical, I do believe that music and perfumery both carry various vibrations, if you will. I've done a little bit of research on plants and flowers. There is a company, I cannot remember I think it's called Athesia, and they actually hook the plants up to a device that allows them to record the sounds that the plants and the flowers make. So given that, I do believe that there are definitely parallels between music and the natural essences of perfumery because they both carry certain vibrations. I do believe that when there is a certain vibration that's emitted, a particular hertz, it can cause a sedative-like effect, which will help with grief because it puts that person in a state of rest where their brain actually kind of slows down and it allows them to fall asleep if they were having insomnia due to grief. In my experience personally as well, there are definitely parallels between the two.
To tell our listeners a little bit more about you and your background, could you tell us more about your musical background specifically in that practice?
Yes, I am a classically trained piano player. I also am self-taught in the regard of playing by ear. So I have that duality going on. I took lessons when I was about 6, started at 6 and ended at about 13. And it actually was kind of a segue into perfumery for me because I liken the way that I create my fragrances to a song. I think in terms of soloists, orchestral pieces, symphonies, whenever I'm creating. But yeah, my musical background, I started at about the age of 6 and developed as I got older. I started wanting to learn about different genres of music. And it just kind of went from there.
So you already kind of touched on this a little bit, but do you connect perfumery to your music practice? Do you make direct parallels when you're blending, for instance?
Not always, but most of the time I do. And it's usually by accident. It's not like something that I consciously do. But I think innately I correlate the two simply because there are a play on words in fragrance. You have notes, which in music you also have notes. You have accords in fragrance, which in music you have chords without the AC. So I do tend to create a synergy between the two, especially when I am creating a complete blend. I do think in terms of the grand scheme of things? How do I want it to play on the skin? So there's a lot of vocabulary that I use that I think is dual for both fragrance and for music.
So accords and chords, you said, for instance.
Accords and chords, notes is synonymous between fragrance and perfumery as well. You are using an example of a choir. You have the soprano, which would be the top notes. You have the alto, which would be the heart note or the middle note. And then you have the tenor, which would be the bass note in perfumery. So I do tend to think in terms of dual vocabulary, and it just kind of helps me to keep things into perspective when I'm creating or blending.
What about the other way? Do you imagine perhaps like the scent of E minor or E major versus D minor, D major?
Not necessarily. However, when I do create a particular accord, or if I'm working with a particular material, sometimes I will hear a certain song that is already out, or it could just be a combination of musical notes. But I don't necessarily think in terms of different keys per se when I'm creating or putting those different notes, the fragrance notes together.
A lot of what you're saying actually makes me think of Stevie Wonder. He had so much crossover with vibrational plant music energy. There's also an album that's actually made to help plants grow. It's called Plantasia, Mother Earth's Plantasia.
Okay.
And Stevie Wonder album is The Secret Life of Plants. I think this one was inspired by Plantasia because it was also one of the first times they used synthesizer.
Wow.
Super cool.
Donna teaches us something today.
Mm-hmm.
Chavalia, do you have anything coming up for your brand that you want to share?
I am a walking work in progress. I'm always working on some type of idea. I am looking to hopefully launch a new scent by summer, late summer, early fall. So I've had some requests. I try to take polls on my Insta stories on Instagram just to see what people are gravitating towards for the different seasons, because I don't generally create according to season. I don't really think in terms of summer, fall, winter, or spring, but I realize that a lot of the Pink Mahogany family members do. So hopefully by I would say early fall, I will have a new fragrance available.
That's awesome. Does it take you a while to make a fragrance? I mean, is it one of those things where you take your time with it?
Yes, definitely. Just like a song, when you want to create a beautiful song that has depth and that allows the listener to actually connect to it. I mean, sometimes you have one-hit wonders, but it's kind of rare in my case. So I do like to take my time. Sometimes I will go and revisit an idea that I've initialized maybe years ago, and something will spark that idea again. So yes, sometimes it takes years, and sometimes it could take, a couple of weeks. It just kind of depends on the complexity and what I want to convey with the fragrance.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, cool. So Donna, are there any other questions we have for Chavalia? I think we covered all our questions and more.
Yeah, you
yeah.
answered them in a really great way. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And thanks for having me back.
A total pleasure. That was the Texas-based Chavalia Mwamba talking about the connections she makes between scent and sound. You can learn more about Chavalia and Pink Mahogany perfumes on Instagram at PM_fragrances.
Our next guest, Kaya Sorhaindo, uses scent as a medium for expanding the experience of art across a diverse range of creative disciplines. Kaya's cross-disciplinary projects offer new areas of inspiration in contemporary perfumery and aim to form deep emotional relationships with audiences. With over 15 years' experience as a creative director, working in the fields of fashion, art, beauty, and publishing, Kaya is the founder and creative director of Folie à Plusieurs and Folie Studio, and he joined us from New York.
Okay, well, Kaya, thank you so much for joining us for this collab between On the Nose and Perfume on the Radio with the wonderful Donna and the wonderful me, Saskia, and the wonderful you, Kaya.
We're so happy to have you.
So I'm going to launch with my first overlong question. At Folie à Plusieurs, you often make parallels between scent and other art expressions, collaborating with some pretty impressive practitioners. So we wanted to ask you, how it's different to work with the different types of creative people. So does one creative output lend itself better to understanding scent?
It's an interesting question. My immediate thought is that Well, I've been really fortunate to work with some amazing artists that trust me, because that's the first thing that you have to establish when you're working with these different artists. But I always find that the various different arts, whether it's photography, film, music, they kind of all start from the same place. It's like someone having a feeling and wanting to articulate that in whatever medium that they're using. When it comes to actually translating this into a fragrance, they start to think about, okay, what kind of experience do we want to create for the user? How can we fully realize the whole emotional landscape of the project? And I think in that way, it's like pretty consistent across all the different mediums. Musicians are very cool. They're always laid back to work with in general. But for me, I love the concept of dance and performance art because of this idea of being present in a moment. You know, there's this kind of immediacy to it, and also this concept of duration. And music is the same thing. It has this element of duration. And if you think about the experience of wearing a fragrance from the top down to the bottom, you have that kind of transition. You're kind of entering into this space, and you're going on to this journey. In that sense, I think working with musicians are also really cool. And I think Donna can also empathize with that, because it's like you've created a collection so masterfully with music.
Thank you. And yeah, I definitely believe that scent and sound are time-based or duration-based, as you just said. So I definitely find the connections in that. It's a really interesting space to explore, for sure.
Yeah, and you're doing it so beautifully. I love everything you're doing. And
I appreciate that. So Kaya, as creative director, your role is one of vision and leadership, and one of management. So how do you begin the process of collaboration between artists, the perfumer, the brand as a whole, even yourself, like in that whole jumble?
Yeah, sometimes I also think I'm a professional intern as well. When it comes to working with working with an artist and then working with a brand, I almost take on two completely different roles. In one scenario, we're having a baby together. You know, we're three parents. You know, the artist, he did the 9 months of labor, doing the research, figuring out what he wants to do. Then he brings this baby into the world, and then he says, well, let's raise this baby together. Let's do something. He already instilled some values in this child, or he has some ideas as to how he would like to raise it. Then I take it through a process of bringing whatever experience and knowledge I have and the understanding of the project. And then I hand it off to Mark or whoever the perfumer is. In that kind of scenario, it's a true collective collaboration. We're creating something together. We're almost, there's a mutual respect. We're all on the same level. I can't do the work that the artist does. The artist can't necessarily do the work that I do. I can't do the work that Mark does. Mark maybe can do the work I do. I don't know. So we all kind of trust in each of our abilities, and we have a shared vision as to what it needs to be. And the reason why I like working with artists is because artists are curious, and they always see through a specific type of lens. And I feel if the artist is really involved in a project and not just doing it as an add-on, then the outcome is honest. And then also I feel it, and I'm able to actually really give special attention to the project. And then Mark or whoever the perfumer is feels it, and they give special attention to it. But if there's a break in the chain, the outcome is always a little bit shallow, or it just feels off, you know. In a sense with the brand, it's different because, and I'm sorry for this analogy, but it's like the brand it's not even a baby, it's like an adolescent, a teenager. Depending on what they invested in their brand and the project and the whole experience they want to create, I can easily bring my experience and kind of build upon that. So if we're looking at an olfactive outcome, there's already elements there that I can kind of use or kind of accentuate and broaden. But when, for example, the teenager is really unruly or something, then that's when I kind of have to take them on a different direction and advise them as to where we should go. But ultimately, like in that scenario, if the parent doesn't like the teacher, they can just take it to another school. There's only so much I can do in that scenario. I understand that they're the client.
And Kaya, when you're speaking about Mark, you're talking about Mark Buxton, your perfume collaborator, right?
Yeah, Mark Buxton, David.
Ches or Cheese?
Yes.
Ches, okay. Do you think that scent can be best expressed on its own, or do you think it's best expressed in tandem with other mediums? And it's a big answer for a small question, I'm sure. So
I have some mentors and colleagues that don't really like this idea of pairing scent with different art forms and these kind of things. They say, well, a perfume should be able to exist on its own as an art piece by itself. My whole thing is like, how are you using, what's the intention? What are you using that for? Generally, yes, you can create a beautiful perfume and it should be experienced by itself without any art forms or paired with any art forms. And I think there are a lot of brands that do that beautifully, I have a different use for fragrance. I'm less concerned about just serving a perfume audience. I'm more interested in that person that, doesn't really like fragrance, loves a Bill Henson photograph, and it's like, there is this Bill Henson scent, and like, wow, man, I would really love to own it because I'm really emotionally involved already with his work. You kind of create this new appreciation for scent. And I guess it's a bit selfish, but I just like to create fragrances on artworks that inspire me. It's sometimes I think we over-conceptualize it with Folie, but it's very, very, very simple. Anybody can do it, It's nothing complicated at all. It's like, I see this artwork, wow, I've always been in love with this photographer, in love with this filmmaker. I always felt that somehow they inspired me. And I just want more of that experience in my life. There's very few mediums that you can actually take with you. If you have headphones, you can walk with music. You have a bag, you can take a book on a journey. You can't really take a photograph or a painting or an Anish Kapoor sculpture, with you. So if you really want to kind of revisit that experience and build upon those ideas and somehow infuse them into your life in a way that it inspires your own craft, I think a perfume is a fantastic carrier or medium for that kind of thing. So to kind of go back to the question, yes, I feel that a perfume doesn't need a film. It doesn't need a score. It doesn't need anything. It can be exactly what it is. But it really depends on what are you using a perfume for? Are you just creating a really immaculate perfume for someone to wear? Or do you want to create a deeper impact in someone's life that extends beyond the body, goes towards the intellect and things like that?
What I love about your process is that it's really truly multidisciplinary. You really respect each medium separately, but also you have a way of bringing them all together and creating this kaleidoscope of modalities with this very chill, intuitive approach that makes it very enticing.
Thank you so much. But when it comes to music, there's so many interesting elements. There's just the instrumentation in a song, and then the instruments that a perfumer uses. And all of these ingredients, they have different frequencies and vibrations. And in music, you have different frequencies and vibrations. And out of all the mediums, whether it's photography, film, I feel that it's more fluid between music and perfume. From creating a fragrance from music, I wouldn't say simpler, but it just feels right. I feel that it flows back and forth much more smoother than actually what I try to do sometimes is photography to a fragrance and then back from a fragrance to a photograph, and I think there's something really special about that, because you would think that translating a photograph, translating a painting, a film, it's probably difficult, but there's so many cues. There's so many visual cues in a photograph, even in a sculpture, right? There's the materials, metal, blah, blah, blah. When it comes to music, you don't necessarily have those visual cues, You have the instrumentation, you have the pace, you have the hi-hats, you have the kicks, And I feel with the perfumer working on a scent for a music composition, there's a lot of information there. So actually, it can be quite literal. Maybe music is the closest medium when it comes to translating a fragrance.
Well, they're both emotional, invisible, visceral, primal. There's no time to intellectualize either. So there's so much truth in both mediums, I find.
Absolutely.
Kaya, have you heard Donna's music?
I can't wait.
Yeah, well, you're in for a treat. She's really got serious talent.
I sing very well in A minor.
I would love to see you perform, Donna.
Performing is a different story. I haven't performed in over a decade. Singing in closets is really my thing. Yeah, stay tuned.
That was Kaya Sorhaindo joining us from New York, one of the most soft-spoken and eloquent people I have ever come across. You can learn more about his work at folie.studio.
Oh, hard is the fortune of they're always controlled, they're always their parents.
That, friends, is our music episode, and I want to thank first of all my lovely, intelligent, and sincere co-host Dana El Masri. You can learn more about Dana at jazminsaraï.com. That's Jazmin with a Z. And be sure to look up her podcast. It's called On the Nose, and it's a deep dive into issues around perfumery. It's quite good. As always, I want to thank Maxwell Williams and Stephen Rimlinger for their music, and Lookout FM for hosting this admittedly rather niche radio show. Perfume on the Radio is produced by the Institute for Art and Olfaction, which is a nonprofit organization based in Los Angeles and is dedicated to accessibility and experimentation in the field of perfume. This episode, like all others, will be archived on perfumeontheradio.com. But if podcasts are your cuppa, you can also download it on a podcast provider of your choice and enjoy it in a location of your choice. This week, I'm listening to it by the light of the hot noonday LA sunshine as I log books into a massive public database. More on that soon. My name is Saskia Wilson-Brown, and I've been your happy host for this episode. We'll see you in a few weeks, and until then, friends, keep it kind, keep it real, and keep it smelly.
You're listening to Perfume on the Radio.
On lookout